them a hide dog it. We go cut up everybody and the start it. And the tell is me a party. Party, I'm supposed to play for the right thing. Excuse me while I write it. I'm supposed to play for the right thing. It's a little song I got to write it. It feels so good.
It is Cincy Life Radio. It is June 23rd, 2011, and today we're looking forward to a special guest, Jason Kamiri, and he's from Iowa, and he's interested in rescheduling cannabis, something that I have been in favor of in the recent past, but I have changed my mind on that a little bit, and I think that it needs a little bit more explanation because as I have worked on this, I have had a few disagreements with people who feel differently about this, like Carl Olson was on his show a couple of weeks ago, and we disagree about rescheduling versus descheduling or unscheduling. Carl's opinion is that you can't really say, because you're not an expert, or I'm not an expert or whatever, that what schedule it should or shouldn't be in. His motivation is just to challenge the scheduling of it because he doesn't believe it should be in a Schedule 1. And my theory is that Timothy Leary back in 1969 challenged the constitutionality of cannabis prohibition and won based on the unconstitutionality. And that's my biggest theory, is that cannabis prohibition or cannabis being listed in the Controlled Substances Act period is unconstitutional. Not that it should be rescheduled, because rescheduling implies that it should be scheduled somehow differently. Not that it should be unscheduled or removed from scheduling, but that it should be scheduled somehow differently. I'm going to try to play this intro, and then I'm going to try to get to our guest here. Our intro is still loading, I believe. It's still processing because I just uploaded it, so it may or may not work. And if that's the case, then I'm going to go ahead and play that at the end. But let me just double check and see here.
100 years ago, they'd say you were possessed by the devil or you were a heretic. 20 years ago, they'd say you were a communist. Now, the really sophisticated totalitarian method now is to say that someone that is a dissenter, that is against the society, is insane. Now, maybe it is insane to be against what's happening in the United States today. Maybe it's insane to try to have hope that something can be done about it. So if that's insane, count me in. But otherwise, make up your own mind. I've never been legitimately arrested. I'm in prison now because one evening I was in a parked car and a policeman came up to the car and opened the door against my wishes and made a pass at the ashtray and said, "You're under arrest for," I said, "For what?" He said, "For marijuana." I said, "What marijuana?" He reached in his pocket. He pulled out 2 joints that I'd never seen before, half joints, and said, "You're under arrest." Now then the judge, instead of giving me bail, as I was entitled to for appeal, held up a book that I had been writing and said, "Your ideas are dangerous, and we're not going to give you bail, and we're going to put you in prison to keep you quiet." All the models and all the philosophers and all the men that I think have really liberated humanity have all done their time on the outside. I want to get back in. I think I belong in American society. I think that a society that imprisons its philosophers is playing with very bad magic. You just can't imprison ideas. Eldridge Cleaver and I disagreed strongly on philosophy and on how to change the world. I saw it more as a spiritual revolution. Eldridge, as you probably know, believed in a violent military revolution, and I felt that this was old-fashioned and would get easily wiped out and create bad vibrations where we wanted good vibrations. I don't have any advice for anyone. I'm just simply saying that we're going to be broadcasting our ideas of hope and of confidence and of courage, and we don't say we're right, but God knows we're about ready for a new philosophy. Last January in Afghanistan, the American government agents stole my passport illegally, kidnapped me.
Valid passport?
It was a valid passport on the sovereign territory of Afghanistan, kidnapped me, put me in a plane, brought me back, and now I'm in Folsom Prison, and I'm broadcasting again.
In case anybody's unfamiliar with that sweet, wonderful voice, that is Dr. Timothy Leary being interviewed in Folsom Prison. He passed away in 1996. When I was a kid, he inspired me with a book that he wrote called Chaos in the Cyber Age, Chaos in the Cyber Culture. which, inspired me when I was a kid, and I was blogging and doing things before we really had the internet that we have now. But he's talking about, a revolution online, being able to communicate in such a direct and universal way in such a massive scale, and getting your ideas across in a way that the mainstream media does, but to, share those ideas without having corporate backing and influences, and, just the power of having that cyber culture. And I just love what he did in his life. He proved that cannabis prohibition can be defeated, as he did in 1969 with his case, Timothy Leary versus the U.S. government. And, we're going to talk about a couple of different efforts because, I'm not a legal scholar, but I do see a lot of different efforts to end prohibition. And some people are going at it one step at a time. Some people are going at it all out, like Barney Frank and Ron Paul, and others are trying to get rid of prohibition altogether. Oregon rescheduled cannabis into a Schedule 2. I'll talk about how that really didn't help them too much, as we see things happening in Oregon right now. In Iowa, where Jason Kamiri is from, where he's going to be our guest today, and he's in favor of rescheduling cannabis, and he's going to describe why that's a good idea and tell us more about his opinion. But Carl Olson has filed a petition in Iowa to reschedule cannabis, and we did a show together a couple of weeks ago. Carl and I did, and him and I disagree on the rescheduling part. I think it should be unscheduled or descheduled. I think rescheduling isn't so good. I think it puts it in the hands of Big Pharma, and it really doesn't give the consumers any rights, as far as being in a different schedule. So we're interested in hearing what Jason has to say today, and I'm going to go ahead and welcome our guest now. Thanks for joining us, Jason. Are you there? Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Jason, yeah, I hear you now. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh,
press
perfect.
the right button now.
Okay.
Sorry, but I think that was my fault. I think I might have pressed mute on my end by accident or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was weird. I could hear my own voice, but not yours. So, hey, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself a little? I'm probably not saying your last name correctly. So if you want to introduce yourself and just give a little background of your activism and kind of where you're going on your path in activism.
Sure. Well, my name's Jason Karimi. I got involved with marijuana activism here in Iowa about 2.5 years ago. And I've been involved with Iowa Patients for Medical Marijuana. And I also run a blog at weedpress.wordpress.com. So that's we've been working on rescheduling, not Iowa Patients or any of the organizations outside of Iowans for Medical Marijuana. Carl Olson's group has been working with rescheduling, something I've personally been supportive of. And there's been a lot of debate over the direction that's going to take the movement and whether or not it's good for patients or not. So Carl just filed a lawsuit against the state of Iowa for failure to reclassify or remove marijuana from Schedule 1 since it no longer fits the statutory criteria. Marijuana has medical use within the United States and therefore cannot be in Schedule 1. So I'm expecting it to happen as a matter of law. I think it's a good thing for patients. I think it will help open up doors for the medical marijuana movement.
I've always been in agreement with that. For a long time, I ran a petition for rescheduling cannabis. I went through the petitionsite.com and got a lot of signatures. Well, not a lot, several hundred signatures for rescheduling cannabis. And I thought it would be a good idea until I started looking at the dirty details of, what that could lead to. Because, rescheduling means that it would be scheduled again, just not scheduled under what it's currently scheduled under. So it'd be scheduled under 2, 3, 4, or 5. And to me, that looks like Big Pharma would get their hands on it. And if you look at any of the drugs that are in Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, there isn't a private entity outside of Big Pharma that sells or manufactures those medicines. And,
well, I don't know of any pharmacy that is selling coca plants, which is in Schedule 2.
Right.
I do know of pharmacies that have been dispensing marijuana despite it being in Schedule 1. The University of Iowa pharmacy here in Iowa has dispensed marijuana as part of a cannabis cancer study for over 30 years now. The scheduling, from what I've seen, does not directly affect the criminal portion of the statutes. All it is a classification. It's what dictates the discussion. Like at the federal level, when you look at the requirements the Attorney General has, anything that's Schedule 1, he must oppose any form of legalization. If that's removed, not necessarily, we're not asking for it to be rescheduled into any specific schedule in Iowa. All we're asking is for it to be removed. Then wherever they put it, then we'll look at it from there. If they put it in Schedule 2, challenge it, 3, challenge it, and so forth, to make sure it's accurate. The Attorney General right now, Schedule 1 is the worst situation we have, and the Attorney General policy is to oppose that at all levels. And on top of that, when you simply remove from Schedule 1, even though the concern about pharmaceutical companies implementing their patents in the other schedules, while that might be a valid situation to be concerned about, it's still going to help patients because this will make this a state issue. This will take away the federal government's ability to interfere with medical decisions. So I don't see it as being anything but a benefit, and if it's only one step toward what your ultimate goal of descheduling is, I don't see how opposing it would be beneficial to the overall goal. And that's what I don't understand.
Well, for example, Senate Bill 728 in Oregon passed, and they've now rescheduled it in Oregon. And so now, if you look at the Senate bill there, it's talking about the scheduling and the laws in relation to the scheduling. So a Controlled Substances Act in Schedule 1 is guilty of a Class B felony, except for otherwise provided in such and such statute. A controlled substance in Schedule 2 is guilty of a Class C felony. There's no other provisions. But I guess the provision under Schedule 1 is just for peyote, which allows for religious usage. But in Schedule 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's no other exceptions. You get in Schedule 2 it's a Class C felony. In Schedule 3 it's a Class A misdemeanor. In Schedule 4 it's a Class C misdemeanor. In Schedule 5 it's a violation. But there is criminal. There's criminal legality involved in that. If you use it inappropriately, or if you're selling it, or if you're, transporting it, trading it, giving it away for whatever other reason, if you're not legally qualified to use a substance in the way you're using it, you do face jail time, and it doesn't necessarily liberate cannabis. And in my estimation, from what Oregon has done, so they have rescheduled to Schedule 2, and just a couple of days ago, they're only dispensaries are getting raided now, so it really hasn't helped proliferate.
Well, why are they getting raided?
Well, the report is saying that they were distributing cannabis, so they were giving it to their patients.
That's from the federal level, though, correct? Oregon law enforcement was not involved in that, were they?
They were. I'm reading it from the Stash, from the normal Daily Audio Stash blog. It looks like it was carried out by local law enforcement. Let me just double check on that. But it does appear that it was the Wake and Bake Lounge raided after nearly 7 months of openly operating in Aloha, Oregon, on June 16, 2011. And it was state officials that commented. It says, 3 residents associated with this cannabis club were also searched. Computers and various equipment and cannabis were confiscated. The execution of the warrants for suspected manufacturing and distribution of a controlled substance. See, and that's, again, what scheduling does is continue to make it a controlled substance. No arrests were made. Let's see, Sergeant Dave Thompson issued a press release. So Sergeant Dave Thompson, a local police officer, not a federal narcotics agent, stating marijuana dispensaries are new to Washington County, have no legal basis to distribute or sell marijuana, and this search warrant is the first to be served on such a dispensary in Oregon. So prior to scheduling cannabis as a Schedule 2, they weren't arresting people in dispensaries. There have been a lot of dispensaries operating in Oregon, and it's only now that and it's rescheduled in Oregon. It's only now that they're shutting these dispensaries down. So I don't see how it's helped these people at all. It just doesn't seem like it's given any liberation to cannabis.
It hasn't. It hasn't yet because the full process is not completed. going back to what you were saying, you were saying that in the Oregon statutes that the scheduling is directly referenced, and it does appear that the different schedules are they do influence the criminal penalties. Like
right.
Schedule 1 has X amount, Schedule 2 has X amount.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm not aware of the federal government being like that at all. I have heard of that in some states where it comes into play when during the discussion on the House floor of whether or not to pass a medical marijuana bill, the scheduling has come into play. And in 2005, in Gonzalez versus Reich, the Supreme Court actually said the medical defense issues that Angel Reich faced or raised would be valid if the scheduling had been changed. They literally said, and I'm trying to look up the quote here, but you need to remove marijuana from Schedule 1 is how I interpreted what they were saying. And in order to raise your state sovereignty, medical defense, in order to have your argument allowed in the federal court. And I'm reading here about this Oregon raid on Toka the town. It says the raid follows a threatening letter issued earlier this month by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon and a majority of DAs around the state, which said that the sale of marijuana was a violation of federal law and would not be tolerated. So what needs to happen now that Oregon has rescheduled into Schedule 2, that's not enough. They need to now petition the federal government and tell them you cannot enforce your Schedule 1-driven criteria for how you make arrests in states anymore. Gonzalez versus Oregon in 2006 said that medical issues belong to the states. As long as marijuana is in Schedule 1 at the federal level, they don't recognize it as a medical issue. Once you change that, they, in my opinion, will have no choice but to back down from the states that have passed these laws. So it's a matter of the whole process needs to be completed. The states and the federal government play off each other in the scheduling criteria, and it's state sovereignty over federal sovereignty. So.
Right. No, and there's some preemption issues with Article 6 of the Constitution and, federal law trumping state law in some regards, at least in regards to Article 6.
That doesn't apply to medical issues according to Gonzalez versus Oregon.
Right. And another thing is, and this is great about Oregon rescheduling, even though I don't think it's helping their state right now, I think that it could help our fight in a federal situation against Schedule 1, because now there is a state that legitimately recognizes cannabis as medicine. So that fight has been won. Scheduling has been, rescheduled to a medical scheduling for cannabis, legitimately, verified in state law and the state constitution of Oregon that, cannabis is medicine now. So they can't legitimately say, what they have been saying in Schedule 1 federally, that it has no recognized medical usage in the United States, because now so now Oregon doing this is a great thing. I think any other states doing this is redundant and unnecessary, because once one state has done this, that invalidates Schedule 1 federally, period. It doesn't need to be done in Iowa. It doesn't need to be done in Utah. It doesn't need to be done anywhere else. It's already been done. It's already been invalidated. So Schedule 1 is invalid right now. Federally.
Yeah, now that if someone raised that in court, I don't know how that would go. I know that in Iowa the last time anyone tried to raise the argument for medical defense, that was in 2005 at the Supreme Court in the Bonjour case. I'm pronouncing that right, Lloyd Bonjour versus the state of Iowa, and they told him since the Board of Pharmacy hasn't acted, then you can't raise this defense. Well, now that the board is recommending to the legislature that they update the law, that might come into play sometime down the road. I don't know if that how that would work out, but the reason I know you had some concerns about rescheduling and removing it from Schedule 1. When I actually served the lawsuit, which just means I did Mr. Olson a favor and served the lawsuit for him to the state attorney general. When I did that, because I'm a director with Iowa Patients for Medical Marijuana, a lot of people who are against the removal of marijuana from Schedule 1 here in Iowa who are activists actually called for me to maybe not be involved with Iowa Patients anymore. And it was because they thought that I was trying to talk on behalf of Iowa Patients, which I wasn't. I was just doing a favor for a fellow activist. So I wanted to have hear out the whole thing on why the removal of marijuana from Schedule 1 is bad for patients in the end. So I think you had a different viewpoint on the situation.
Well, yeah, it's just from my point of view, there's no drug in Schedule 2, 3, 4, and 5 that isn't sold by, and these the ones that are actually listed in Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4, and Schedule 5. There isn't one of those drugs listed that isn't sold by Big Pharma. So you're saying that coca leaves aren't, sold directly from pharmacies, but if they were sold by anybody else, it'd be a Schedule 1 issue. They'd be going to jail for that because it's not a valid medicine scheduled under the Controlled Substances Act. It's something that's outside of the Controlled Substances Act, that isn't legitimate. And I think in cases of unprocessed coca leaves, that's a Schedule 1 issue. But I mean, as far as things that are actually scheduled in Schedule 2, 3, 4, 5, Big Pharma controls those medicines, and if somebody manufactures those or applies to manufacture those, they need the licensing from the Department of Health, the FDA, the DEA, and then to sell them, you need to have a pharmacist license, you need to have liability insurance, you need to have the Department of Health inspect your facility and give you a license and all these other things that Ma and Pa will be neglected from doing. And I don't think that we would get anything like raw cannabis buds. I think we'd get something like dronabinol or marinol or Sativex or something, not something that's useful and God-given like cannabis buds.
Well, so how are the 16 states that currently have medical marijuana programs into law, how are they getting the raw buds then? Like, if we remove marijuana from Schedule 1 at the federal level, does that mean that all of the states that have been doing this for some of them now 14, 15 years, does that mean all those laws are going to be immediately invalidated?
Well, it's not that they're invalidated. I mean, they're already invalidated daily by the federal government. Those raids that happen in my state, California, all the time, where this whole issue started in 1996. I mean, these people are complying with state law. They're paying their taxes. They're getting their license from the local municipalities. They're registering with the state. They're not holding more cannabis than is allowed. They're not distributing in a fashion that's dangerous to the community, yet the federal government continues to trump state law, and even state municipalities like L.A. and San Diego have been going after local dispensaries based on one thing or another, saying, well, like for example, L.A., the city of L.A. has announced that there is no legal dispensaries in L.A. Even though there's over 1,000 dispensaries there, they're saying that every single one of them are invalid. Now, they've just kind of squeaked through the process, and they've opened their business and they've sold cannabis anyway, just like they did in 94, 95, and 96 before Proposition 215. I mean, they were operating in business before there was a state law, but that wasn't that they were legitimately operating their business. They were just ignored by the law enforcement. But as of recently, even in Oregon, where they've rescheduled cannabis, these people are getting raided by state and federal authorities. So it's not that the law is valid now. It's just that the people have spoken, and the politicians are kind of heeding to the people a little bit, saying, "Well, we don't want to step on their feet because we don't want to get ousted from our position." I think that's my opinion.
Well, I think the politicians are a little confused on this issue, to put it nicely. They don't seem to have a clue as to what's going on. I was watching the C-SPAN thing on your guys' bill out there, Senate Bill 5955, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce her name right, but Senator Cheryl Flug out there in Washington, she said, I'm not aware that the state of Washington has the power, particularly that would survive in court, to reschedule the FDA's decision. And she was talking about the removing marijuana from Schedule 1. That was the same time that Don Pierce, which I know you had talked about on your blog, Don Pierce, one of the guys with the Washington Association of Sheriffs, he said that the ultimate solution is for the state to reclassify and then petition the federal government. And I know you had said you were against his solution there on your blog, so I want to know, what other solutions are there to get the federal government to stop invalidating all of LA's dispensaries or all of Oregon's dispensaries and stop interfering in state law? What else can we do?
Well, I mean, they always bring up a different argument. I just think they're against it no matter what, and they'll violate the law even if the law is in our favor. I think they'll violate the law to shut us down regardless what we do until it's completely removed from scheduling. But what I'm saying is, like, for example, they use this single convention treaty, and they're saying, well, we can't have cannabis sales, period, because the United States is involved in a treaty with so many other nations saying that cannabis industry is illegal. And that's a worldwide treaty thing. So once we even get past the scheduling, even if it got completely removed from drug scheduling, totally removed, we've still got to deal with, we've got a treaty to deal with, the Single Convention Treaty and a couple other treaties.
Okay, sure. They have, I'd agree with you, they use every cop-out, every step along the way. I mean, it took our Iowa Board of Pharmacy here in Iowa, it took a lawsuit to get them to actually look at the science on this. Now it's taking a lawsuit against the legislature to simply follow the pharmacy board's recommendation. And once that happens, it's probably going to take a lawsuit to get the state to move against the federal government. But once the federal government is notified by the states that this is invalid because it's a medical issue, if the issue of the treaties comes up, from what I see on the drug war, we're the ones bombing other countries. Other countries are not going to come in here and say we're gonna block your trade if you don't stop letting sick patients get medical marijuana. So if the federal government really has that as their cop-out, that's weak. We're the ones going into other countries. I think that would be easily shot down when they come up with that excuse.
Oh, I agree. Well, I mean, I think that prohibition in general, I think that drug scheduling in general for cannabis especially is unconstitutional. I mean, Article 5 of the Constitution says we have the right to life, liberty, and property. The Declaration of Independence says, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, in my estimation, prohibition violates our Constitution, but, it's not often that the government these days goes by the Constitution. They go by new and extreme laws that, they think trump the Constitution, which is invalid in itself. I don't know how we're going to get past it entirely. I think that, removing it from scheduling is a good first step, because if it's not scheduled under the Controlled Substances Act, then they can't use that excuse. If it's still scheduled under Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, they can still use that excuse, and they still do use that excuse, just like in Oregon. But, I think removing it from the schedule is one issue that we need to take care of, and then we need to worry about this Single Convention Treaty, and just opt out, via Article 6 of the Constitution. The Constitution in itself, local government and local law under the Constitution in the United States trumps any foreign treaties, because we're not obligated to any foreign dictators or laws, because we're locally sovereign. We're a independent nation. So I don't think that even these treaties are valid, but that's something that they use. I mean, I don't know why they use it, but they hate marijuana. They want to continue to use these stupid excuses. So, I mean, we have more than just, the scheduling fight to fight. We have treaties to fight and other things too. And, the only way I can see it is just to declare our independence and say it's illegal. This whole thing with prohibition is illegal from the get-go.
Yeah, I think we're kind of the ones that created this mess. The United States are the ones that started with the whole racist reefer madness stuff. We're going to have to be the ones to fix it. It's not like this is irreversible. It was just a bunch of bureaucrats signing different legislation until it became a big whirlpool of confusion. But recently we've seen, Canada just had their entire prohibition on cannabis thrown out on constitutional grounds, because they ruled in 2000 there was a constitutional right to medicine. Since there's a constitutional right, the government is obligated to allow that to happen. They've been too restricting on the medical marijuana program. So Judge Taliano, he just threw out the whole scheme and said, until you fix it, you have 90 days. If it doesn't happen, then the whole thing is moot. So obviously it's still in court, and that throwing out of the law doesn't apply yet. But there's a lot of pressure up in Canada to recognize this as a constitutional issue. And then we had in 2009, Argentina ruled that it is unconstitutional for the government to arrest people for small possession of marijuana. So a week after that happened, Mexico came out and said we are no longer going to arrest people for small possession of all drugs. I think that the whole consensus is moving toward more of a common sense policy, and I think it's a matter of just keeping the pressure on legislatively, judicially, politically, in the media, and making sure that we don't let the lying prohibitionists get away with their lives. We'll win this. I think overall, every concern that's out there, I think it's all coming together now.
I agree. Well, like you're saying, with these other countries like Portugal and Holland and such, especially Holland, one way around these treaties, in my opinion, is, don't tax the substance. Do what Holland does and tax the income. I'm not against taxes. There's a lot of activists out there that are like, oh my God, if we legalize cannabis, they're going to tax us. That's not a concern for me. I pay taxes on 3 different businesses. I pay taxes on my products. I pay taxes on my income. And I think that we have an obligation to help the infrastructure in the community work. So taxes are okay for me. But the way to get around these stupid treaties is tax the income like Holland does. Don't tax the product. I mean, that's one thing. Oh, go ahead.
Like I was for Prop 19 as a non-California citizen, but a lot of, from what I saw, I think it was something like 30% of people supportive of legalization said that they voted no on Prop 19 in exit polls. That's just one of the numbers I saw. I don't know if that's 110% accurate. It's been a while, but basically there was some opposition to Prop 19 because of the $50 an ounce tax. They thought it was too much government tax, too much money going back into the hands of the people who have enforced this unconstitutional laws on us for decades. Yeah. And I actually am against the Prop 19 tax in the end. I think it was, just like with the removal of marijuana from Schedule 1, a step in the right direction, and one that, in my cost-benefit analysis, benefited the movement overall. But so, would you always be against taxes such as in Prop 19, or would you, seeing that, okay, in this case we get a dumb tax of $50 an ounce in order to not get arrested, the next time we make a push to lower that to $30 an ounce, and eventually the ultimate goal is to get it down to similar levels of alcohol and tobacco, would that be something that you think would be a good strategy? Or?
Well, for me, I was totally for Prop 19. I have several videos out there that was talking about how the Board of Equalization in California says that taxes have always applied to marijuana, and that it's up to the local municipalities to judge what that tax rate is. So Prop 19 really didn't change anything. It just was a way to pander the voters and say, hey, this is going to benefit you. Look, we've got taxes written right into the law. But that's always been so. I mean, the Department of Equalization released a memo in 2003 saying that there's never been a time in history of California where cannabis is not taxable. So, I mean, I'm not against taxes. I'm totally for, participating in the community and paying a tax. I don't think there should be any kind of a sin tax like they were proposing for Prop 19. I'm in agreement with you. I think it was a good first step, and I wasn't against Prop 19. But I think that it should be taxed just like any other herb. When I go to the herb store and I buy something that's medicinal like echinacea or ginger or, any other herb for that matter, I pay taxes on it. But it's not a sin tax. It's not an excessive tax. It's just a state local retail tax, and that's what I agree with.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I don't see why so many people were against Prop 19. I really think it had to do with competition and the fact that it would be unprohibited, and so prices would decrease, and they would have to work as legitimate business people instead of black market dealers. And I have a lot of friends that are growers that sell in the black market and that sell in the dispensary market, and some of them are not as much of my friends as they used to be because I disagreed with the fact that they were against Prop 19, and we just had, verbal disagreements about that. But most of it, what I saw was, they didn't want Philip Morris. They were saying Philip Morris is going to come in and take over our industry, or, such and such is going to take over our industry. And I've always came back to the fact that it's not Philip Morris we have to worry about. It's Pfizer and Merrick and, Johnson & Johnson that we have to worry about. It's Big Pharma that is getting the patents on cannabis. It's not Philip Morris. It's not Camel.
Actually, I completely agree. I don't, that's a good point to bring up, is that Philip Morris, they did buy some land out in the Emerald Triangle. However, if I have to compete as a small grower, if I'm allowed to grow with Philip Morris growing as well, I'll take their pesticide-ridden garbage any day, and people would much rather have my homegrown organic. But
Absolutely.
With the pharmaceutical industry, what I'm most worried about, and here's where I'm coming from, on why I think removing marijuana from Schedule 1 as a start is a benefit. The longer we wait to attack this scheduling, the more patents this pharmaceutical industry gets, the more research into this garbage like the Marinol pill that most patients did not like because it's too strong. The longer they have to wrap their hands around the natural plant, the longer I think it's going to take, or the harder it's going to be for us to unchain the chains that Big Pharma is currently trying to put around them. I think that the longer we wait to attack this scheduling and get this to where states are no longer in fear of the federal government is to move while we can now, and not to wait or to just say, well, once this happens, Big Pharma will take over. I think they already are taking over. Like, I already think they're threatening the market. So.
No, but I think they are. I think that the only problem that I have with rescheduling is they have 150 patents on this plant already, and once it's rescheduled federally, they can start exercising those patents and making money off cannabis. And when they're making money off of it, then they're going to be contributing to the campaign funds of, Prohibitionists 1, 2, and 3 to keep it regulated in such a way that little guys don't have access to the market. That's the only thing I fear, because I really believe in the cannabis market, and I love my friends that are in there providing medicine to people, and I would hate to see them get trumped by Big Pharma and the laws that they may introduce. And that's what it really comes down to is, like with the sugar industry, I was posting about that recently, how the Von brothers in Florida are capitalizing via a monopoly that they have introduced through regulations and laws that they get premium prices for sugar that is something like 22 cents a pound for sugar, where the world market is only charging 7 cents a pound, and the government is obligated to buy all of our sugar, and all of the commerce for sugar has to come from U.S. businesses, meaning basically them. And so they've got this monopoly based on all the laws and regulations that they've proposed and that they've campaigned for. So the more money that they get from the sugar industry, the more money they have to infuse both the Republicans and the Democrats to influence laws to their benefit, which is what they've done. Like every year, every election year, they donate to both the Republican campaign and the Democrat campaign, so that both of these entities, both of these groups owe them favors. So no matter who wins, they win too. It's just a corrupt system we're in.
That's what I've come to the conclusion of. It's almost like no matter what happens with this, as the medical marijuana issue moves forward politically, legislatively, and all that, is Big Pharma is going to benefit from this one way or another. And they are, it's my opinion as well, that they are at every twist and turn trying to oppose the natural plant, the safest plant known to man. They are trying to keep it under wraps as long as they can, and while they try and wrap their hands around it. Recently, up in Minnesota, Minnesota Normal's Kurt Hanna filed a petition with the Board of Pharmacy that was pretty similar to the one we had here in Iowa 2 years ago, that forced the Board of Pharmacy to have those hearings. That sent kind of some shockwaves around the world when little Iowa wakes up. Well, now Minnesota, rather than do the same thing and rather than exercise their state sovereignty, the Board of Pharmacy made a bill to change the law before they had to respond to Kurt Hanna's petition. So the law that Kurt Hanna was petitioning under got thrown out, and now instead of the state having the ability to look at Schedule 1 drugs, now the DEA has to tell them what to do. And the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy can't do anything about it. I threw a royal fit on my blog, and I had an hour-long conversation with the Board of Pharmacy executive director. He tried to tell me it wasn't politics, and after that hour, he ended up pretty much hanging up on me because I knew what I was talking about, and he was trying to spin the situation. And every single time that we have any kind of progress, they're going to fight us. This has never been a battle of truth or honesty or the good guys versus the bad guys. This has been a battle of lies and lies and lies, and that's what we're fighting. And I don't know how else to fight it, to get it out of these schedules, to get it out of the improper classification, than to start it at square one and remove marijuana from Schedule 1. Get that out of the way, and then start arguing over the abuse potential and all that other jazz that goes along with the other schedules. Because there is going to be a time where the pharmaceutical companies are going to want to cash in, and I don't know how to stop them other than simply fight for equal rights for patients to grow their own while they're trying to do their patent.
Yeah, I wish, and like like what they're proposing in Washington. They're giving us a new initiative now from the ACLU and a couple other groups. They're proposing that they sell cannabis in liquor stores, or the liquor store board is the liquor board is overseeing dispensaries and licensing dispensaries to sell cannabis to people, but they are not allowed to grow their own cannabis. They have to buy it from the state, no matter how they look at it, if this bill passes, which it can't possibly pass because Governor Chris Gregoire said that we couldn't even have medical dispensaries based on federal preemption, and they just won't allow that. But that's the thing that gets me is this federal preemption, Article 6 and different, provisions, Article 14, or Amendment 14 and such, 14th Amendment, is that we can't, really override federal law the way that they've set us up. It's so hard for us to get the DEA out of our states, even in states that have medical marijuana, that the only way I can see doing it is attacking it federally. And, for example, Barney Frank and Ron Paul are proposing a new bill for removing cannabis from federal scheduling and giving it back to the states. And that's, I think, a good move. That's one possibility. I just saw that in the Wall Street Journal.
But that bill actually places it in Schedule 3. And so you're not against that bill because it places it in Schedule 3? I mean, that's
not the one that I just seen. There's two of them. There's one that wants to reschedule, and there's one that wants to remove it from federal control completely. But there is two of them. This one just came out on the 22nd. I was just reading it today, but I know there's definitely two of them. This one was just recently introduced. The one that you're talking about for rescheduling in Schedule 3 is way back from 2004, and they've kind of regurgitated it back and forth over the years, but I think that one's pretty well dead. But this one, it's basically saying Reps Barney Frank and Ron Paul don't always see eye to eye on policy matters, but Massachusetts liberal and Texas libertarian are teaming up to introduce a bill that would end federal prohibition on marijuana, leaving it up to each state to set the marijuana policy. So it's just removing the policies that they have federally on it and giving it back to the states. And I think that's a great move. And I'm definitely supporting that one. But I've told Carl Olson on the show that we did together that I think the National Initiative for Democracy is a great policy and a way to do things too, where we have a national referendum and a national initiative process where we can trump laws that, by the vote of the people, we can trump laws that are against the will of the people. Whether that's a possibility in our lifetime, I don't know, but, we didn't have state initiatives 100 years ago. I mean, those just recently came about. State initiative processes, weren't even a part of our society for over 150 years in the United States, and then we started electing those, those initiative processes in the states. And so now we've got 24 states that have an initiative process, and they continue to grow. So, I think that a federal initiative process is a possibility, and we could end the treaties, we could end the Controlled Substances Act, we could attack it on a federal level. If Barney Frank's and Ron Paul's thing doesn't go through, there's other possibilities. But it's just so complicated, like you were saying. They try every step of the way to fight us, and they'll use stupid reasoning like this treaty or that treaty, or no medical benefits in the United States, or blah, 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 all these stupid things that they bring up that make no sense. And they use them anyway. And everybody sees through it. Everybody knows they're full of shit, but they still use these things. So the only way I can see to do it is just to get rid of it federally.
Yeah, I'm looking, because I actually wrote like a really quick article on it after I got emails from like the Marijuana Policy Project list and all the lists or whatever. Like, I got 3 emails about this from Ron Paul, and I just automatically assumed that it was going to be just a rescheduled into Schedule 3. If it removes it completely, that's even better. And now that I'm reading it, maybe that is what it's doing. And if that's the case, that would be better than what is currently happening. The chance of it passing, I don't know how big of a chance it has of passing, because in the past it hasn't garnered much support. From what I've understood. But with Ron Paul running for president now, he's got a much louder voice. People are taking him a lot more seriously, and a lot of people are waking up. Maybe this is our solution right here. This would be awesome. But
and also Gary Johnson, too. Gary Johnson is on board with it just as much. And so with those two running for president and having that platform and Ron Paul's voice growing louder and louder, I agree. I think that we do have a better chance now than ever before.
Yeah, Gary was here on Saturday in Des Moines for the Strong American Now Debt Summit. He spoke for 20 minutes, and at the beginning of his speech, he said, I'm going to approach this like a job interview. And every time I've seen the guy speak, which has been about 4 times now, it seems to get bigger and bigger, and the crowd literally, it's like a rock concert toward the end. In the middle of his speech, somebody yelled out, "You're hired." And this is at a Republican, very Republican conference, and the last part of his speech was about the drug war, and it's the one that got the most people talking. We had people yelling at each other in the crowd. The country doesn't want to legalize, and I'm talking back. Yes, they do. You just haven't heard it yet. And actually, people ended up, as they were leaving, talking about Gary Johnson and talking about what kind of an impactful speech it was. He's making a lot of waves, and that'll help us. I don't know if it's going to help us this year with the politics. I think politicians are still too afraid of getting pinged as the drug guy. And right now, as Gary's being put through the ringer on his openness about marijuana, I think that's going to be what a lot of politicians are quietly paying attention to. I think that this is going to set the standard for where this discussion goes after 2012.
Oh, I agree. And Ron Paul has, he's been very outspoken on liberty, and so he wants to legalize all drugs. But Gary Johnson's taking a much more political approach to it and saying, well, let's just start with marijuana. And I agree with that. I mean, I'm into, what's going to work, and I think that would work better than let's legalize all drugs. But I am far more in agreement with Ron Paul on the fact that we just shouldn't be having the federal government telling us what to put in our body, period. I mean, that's just a personal decision. But Gary Johnson and Ron Paul, maybe vice president and president, I would love to see that happen. That would be beautiful.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting race with those two getting more other voices out there. I know Ron Paul, I'd lean more toward Ron Paul's take on that issue. I think we should do what we did in Portugal. I think it's successful. I think it's common sense. I think it's cost-benefit analysis. I think it's the best way to go. And I've said that ever since I heard about what Portugal was doing and just simply looked at the stats. But I think the major difference, I still want to say I think the major difference is just getting marijuana out of Schedule 1. If Ron Paul's bill is the way, if that can get done first, then that's the best solution. But if we have to wait on that for another year, or if they don't pass it this year, if we can still just attack Schedule 1 and force them to at least acknowledge its inaccuracy, let them play their games and put it in another schedule. Here in Iowa, the Iowa Board of Pharmacy even said in their transcript that Schedule 2 really isn't the right schedule. It might be 3, 4, 5, and one member, from what I remember, even said it maybe should be out of all of those schedules. So, like,
nice.
What we're doing here in Iowa, where we don't have a ballot initiative process, I think it's going to help us here at the state, and I think it's going to accomplish our ultimate goal of getting marijuana out of this schedule completely, because it doesn't fit anywhere.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that it doesn't do what I think it's going to do with the pharmacy, industry, with Big Pharma getting their money behind prohibition. That's my only fear, and Carl and I continue to disagree on this, and he thinks that maybe I'm crazy, but I just think that, the Big Pharma making money off cannabis is a bad idea, and when their patents are effective, that's when I get scared, because then they're actually making money off of it and they have a vested interest. Right now they have... go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, just that the vested interest right now that they have, I mean, obviously they have enough to spend tens of millions of dollars on getting these patents, and I don't think they would waste that money if they didn't think it was going to be in their benefit. I think they honestly know more than we know about what's going to happen with cannabis scheduling. And the DEA has proposed rescheduling cannabis recently, and a lot of talk in the federal government about rescheduling cannabis. But to have the DEA talking about it, and then to also see 150 patents come out from the medical industry on cannabis, that's what scares me the most, is why would they spend tens of millions of dollars to give us a plant that we could grow ourselves or possibly use in a non-pharmaceutical environment? I don't think they're looking at that in the same way that we are. I think they're looking at it as, hey, once it's rescheduled, we get another product, and then it's their product.
I think that's completely valid. I don't think that's crazy at all. I think you're right. They are looking at how to spin this to their benefit as much as possible. This whole, in my opinion, the entire prohibitionary scheme, and most people's opinions that look into it, it's money. And that's why prohibition is in place. That's why they have talking points. They don't have a discussion. There's talking points. Back in 1988, the DEA argued against federal rescheduling by saying we need more research. We need more research. Now, when the Board of Pharmacy was looking at rescheduling, opponents said we need more research. Well, there's been 21 years of research going on since then, of opportunities for research. Why is it the same talking point? If you want research so much, why don't you help out and get more research? This isn't a discussion. What this is right now is we're charging, and the DEA and all these hacks are backpedaling and getting their butts handed to them as one lie after another falls off the table. And so they're managing it. They're on the back pedal, and I think that at every step of the way, any attempt they have to fight to keep their money base, which is prohibition, still going, I think they'll do that. And I think that's something we have to be aware of and something we have to anticipate and respond to. I don't think that's a reason for us to stop or to be too worried about what they're going to do. It's already as in the worst situation it can be. It can only get better, and as they backpedal, we just have to keep forcing them back. And that's the way I look at it. So.
Well, I just hate the fact that our community has no money. You know, we depend on people like Soros and big, corporate moguls to get our money that have vested interest, but our community really doesn't have any money, and it really takes a lot of money to get this going, to get political agendas passed or initiatives or even petitions passed in any kind of valid way. Although I think Carl's been very successful without a lot of money, and I praise him for doing what he's done. But in fact, like I said earlier in the show, I was in favor of rescheduling cannabis too. But back when I was in favor of it, I had no idea how much Big Pharma had their hands around it. It wasn't only until about 3 months ago that I found out there was, one patent after another being put on cannabis, and I'm like, damn, why would they spend tens of millions of dollars to, research a plant that they're not going to benefit from? These people are, big corporate entities that look at the bottom line before they look at anything. They don't want to give us cannabis. They want to take it. And why would they be spending tens of millions of dollars to research it when it's only going to benefit them? That's the only thing I can see, is that it's only going to benefit them. And they're smarter than just to, go and try to reschedule it to give it to us, I think.
Well, when you're talking about like how our local communities don't have money and we're facing big corporate giants, that's completely true. What I've recently done with my because this is my number one issue is the marijuana issue. It has been ever since I was arrested for it. The thing I've looked at politically is I would urge marijuana activists to branch out into the liberty movement more, like you were saying, Gary Johnson and Ron Paul. I'm starting a chapter of Young Americans for Liberty at my college, and hopefully that'll be able to bring more people. That'll help us with our political clout, our political force, when we coordinate with other groups that don't strictly stick to drug policy or marijuana policy. Like Students for Sensible Drug Policy is good, but there's also Students for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, the Libertarian Party, even sects of the Republican Party have their own groups which talk about this. And if you want to attack the whole thing, we can't just focus on the argument over marijuana, but even the economics, which is we don't have money. The people that are trying to dictate policy to us do, and the way to fight that is through political clout and have as much force behind us as we can to force these people to at least be decent, So.
Exactly. No, I agree, and I praise you for that. That's awesome, and we're a liberty, minded family too. Before I got into, cannabis activism again, when I got arrested, I was 16, 17, and 19, and I kept getting arrested because I kept wearing, big old cannabis leaves on my shirts, and, and I would have a big joint in my pocket at the same time, and I wouldn't care. I'd just keep getting searched and getting arrested, and I did it because of political activism. And then I became a Christian, and I started going to, local Christian churches and speaking in front of a Southern Baptist conference once about suicide because my brother had killed himself. So I started getting into the religious and the, conservative areas of our culture. But I found so much support there that I never thought would be there, and that inspires me. So what you're saying, and tell me again what the group is in your college?
Young Americans for Liberty. It's
that's awesome.
It's basically it's classic liberalism, limited government, leave each other alone, get government out of our lives. Just basic message that everyone seems to be pretty supportive of. So
that's awesome. Well, Jason, you've been a great guest. I appreciate you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all I had to say. I was about to thank you. I didn't know how late the show goes, but
we got about 3 minutes left, so I'm just really pleased that you came on and talked with me, and that we didn't have any contention, because there's so much around this issue, so much contention, and everybody is so. Yeah, we are, and I love what Carl Olson has to say. I've been in agreement with what he's had to say, except for the rescheduling part. Other than that, his religious beliefs, the Ethiopian Coptic Church Association, different freedom issues that he supports. I mean, I'm in 100% agreement with him. But I think that when you're very convinced that you're right, like I know I'm right, and you're right, and he knows he's right, that cannabis prohibition is wrong, that we kind of get defensive because we have to fight off so much, opposition and so many opposing forces and groups, and then we kind of back ourselves into a corner waiting for the fight to come to us. And I'm just glad that we don't fight, and I would love to have you on again someday, but you've brought a lot to the conversation, and I really appreciate what you have to say. Thanks so much, Jason.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. Good luck to you guys out there.
All right, thanks again. Hey, take care, and we'll let you know how it goes. Maybe we'll have you on again.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
100 years.